Imagine living in a modern, bustling metropolis, filled with millions of highly active people. You feel relatively safe every single day because there is a massive, highly trained police force constantly patrolling the dark streets with advanced communication networks and fast response vehicles. We have been completely conditioned by our society to believe that maintaining basic public order always requires a heavily funded, centralized law enforcement agency. Therefore, we naturally assume that the ancient Roman Empire, which successfully controlled over 50 million people across 3 massive global continents, must have possessed an incredibly sophisticated and massive police department. We picture ancient detectives actively patrolling the dark alleys of Rome and official government investigators solving daily violent crimes. But the absolute shocking historical reality is that the Romans did not have a single professional civilian police officer anywhere in their empire. They operated a staggering global superpower for several brutal centuries without ever inventing the basic concept of a modern police station or a dedicated emergency response network. This creates a deeply terrifying historical paradox for anyone studying their culture. To a modern citizen, the complete absence of a police force instantly guarantees absolute chaos and violent, bloody anarchy in the streets. But the Roman state successfully maintained a highly functional society without ever relying on men in blue uniforms. They achieved this incredible stability by engineering a brutal and deeply unequal social system that relied completely on psychological fear and private, bloody retaliation rather than public justice. If you were walking down a dark, silent street in ancient Rome and someone violently robbed you, there was absolutely nobody you could call for immediate physical help.
The ancient legal system was entirely built upon the terrifying fundamental concept of private prosecution and aggressive physical self-help. Therefore, if someone stole your property or assaulted your family, it was your own personal responsibility to track down the criminal, gather the necessary legal evidence, and physically drag them before a civil judge. There were no official detectives assigned to your specific case, and no government agents investigating the bloody crime scene. But an average poor citizen possessed absolutely zero physical or financial power to confront a violent criminal gang on their own. Therefore, the entire Roman society was completely organized around a massive, invisible web of social protection, known as the patron and client system. Every single vulnerable citizen actively sought the direct protection of an incredibly wealthy and powerful aristocratic patron. In exchange for absolute political loyalty and daily public obedience, the rich patron provided financial support and massive physical protection. If a loyal client was robbed, the wealthy patron would simply unleash his own private army of strong slaves and loyal supporters to hunt down the attackers and exact brutal, immediate revenge. The streets were not kept safe by neutral laws, but by the terrifying threat of elite retaliation. We deeply value the modern democratic concept that justice is completely blind and every single person is treated equally before the law. Therefore, we expect the legal system to apply the exact same punishments regardless of social class or extreme personal wealth. But the ancient Roman legal system actively despised the idea of human equality and weaponized extreme social discrimination to maintain public order. The law explicitly divided the entire population into strict social categories, where wealthy citizens and poor commoners were subjected to entirely different standards of justice. Therefore, a rich aristocrat who committed a serious crime might simply face a minor financial fine or a comfortable political exile. But if a poor laborer or a slave committed the exact same offense, they would be subjected to absolute physical destruction. The Roman state deliberately utilized incredibly horrific public punishments like crucifixion, fighting wild beasts in the sandy arena, or agonizing slow death in the toxic mines, specifically for the helpless lower classes. Because there were no professional police officers actively walking the beats to catch every single criminal, the state relied entirely on the overwhelming psychological terror of these spectacular,
asymmetric punishments. They successfully maintained strict public order, not by ensuring that common criminals were consistently caught and processed, but by making the ultimate physical consequences of being caught so utterly unimaginable that the starving masses were absolutely paralyzed by sheer terror. The absence of a police force simply meant that the state had to be infinitely more terrifying than the criminals themselves. The wealthy aristocratic elites did not care at all if a poor common citizen was violently murdered in a dark, crowded tavern over a simple gambling dispute. Therefore, the daily street-level violence was completely ignored by the vast imperial government as long as it remained strictly contained within the poorest slum neighborhoods. But the ruling emperors were absolutely terrified of massive political riots or highly organized armed rebellions that could suddenly threaten their immense personal power and global imperial control.
When the private networks of the wealthy patrons completely failed to control a massive, angry mob, the state finally intervened with absolute military devastation. The Emperor, Augustus, created the massive urban cohorts, which were essentially heavily armed elite soldiers permanently stationed directly inside the capital city. They did not patrol the daily streets looking for simple pickpockets, but rather waited patiently in their barracks to violently crush massive public uprisings using strict military formations and lethal, deadly force. To handle the dangerous night, the Romans created the vigiles, who were originally designed simply as a massive, organized firefighting force. Because massive chemical fires were the absolute greatest threat to the ancient crowded city, these thousands of firemen constantly roamed the dark streets carrying heavy axes and water buckets.
Therefore, they accidentally became a primitive night watch, stopping violent gangs and hunting down escaped slaves, simply because they were the only organized physical force awake in the endless darkness. Outside the massive walls of the capital city, the imperial control stretched across vast, endless provinces filled with dark forests and treacherous mountain roads. Therefore, you might assume that the local governors utilized vast networks of provincial police to keep the vital trading routes safe from violent highwaymen and organized local gangs. But the provincial governors possessed absolutely zero civilian investigators and relied entirely on the brutal, uncompromising efficiency of the Roman army. Small detachments of heavily armed legionaries were stationed at key physical intersections and strategic supply depots, specifically to intimidate the local populations and aggressively protect the vital flow of imperial tax money. If a notorious bandit gang became too powerful, the soldiers would simply march out and completely annihilate them, using overwhelming organized military supremacy. Therefore, the entire Roman concept of law and order was never actually about protecting the weak or seeking abstract moral justice for the average person. It was a highly calculated and highly decentralized machine designed specifically to protect the immense property and absolute political power of the ruling elite. We look back at the glory of the empire and marvel at the incredible safety of the famous Roman roads. But the dark and sobering historical truth is that this legendary ancient peace was entirely built upon a foundation of terrifying social inequality, severe military intimidation, and the absolute ruthless power of unchecked private vengeance.